Hi, my name's Miss Emma. I'm a highly qualified and experienced teacher, and I realised with the new Australian curriculum that teachers were not being given a consistent way to a solution for covering the whole of the Australian without having to mix and match with programs. When you're buying lots of programs, a program for spelling, a program for phonics, a program for reading comprehension, what have you, lots of programs, it's really expensive and you lose the consistency and continuity throughout the school. Now, first of all, I just want to remind everybody that the Australian curriculum is supposed to really be a kind of a gauge to see where children should be at every grade level. It's really the way that our education system sort of compensates for the lack of differentiation that we want to be able to use. If we had the ideal scenario in a school, children wouldn't be constrained by a grade level. What it also means is, of course, supposing we know we want children to one-to-one count, 1, 2, 3, to add and take away, etc., etc. If you are looking at a year 4 child who is doing long multiplication or algebraic equations or whatever, you don't need to evaluate can they one-to-one count, because you know they can, because if they can do the algebraic equations or the quadratic equation, whatever else, if they can do that, of course they can one-to-one count. Just hold on to that thought, which seems logical to me, but just hold on to that thought. So the Australian curriculum is a guide. Now, what I've done with SSP is I've created a framework so that Foundation and Year 1 teachers cover every single strand of the Australian curriculum using one approach, one framework. Education departments try to do this. Think about C2C in Queensland, L3 in New South Wales. That's what they've done. They've thought, here's the Australian curriculum. We want teachers to be able to follow the Australian curriculum with consistency and continuity. So here's the Australian curriculum. Now let's give them the framework so they can do it, so that we also know what everybody's doing. We can gauge how well each teacher's doing, etc., etc. So it's about accountability as well. Nobody else, as far as I know, as an individual, has created a way for Foundation and Year 1 teachers in particular to be able to cover every strand of the Australian curriculum. It's not the kind of thing teachers normally do. It's normally companies or it's education departments or whatever, but that's what I've done, and perhaps that's why people are a little bit, who on earth is this person? And ironically, because it is so good, and you only have to talk to teachers who are using it, who will say, yes, we're not only meeting, we're exceeding the strands, and we're getting children reading age-appropriate chapter books with fluency and comprehension far earlier. They're using their writing skills are in line with their reading skills. They're using great grammar, punctuation, etc., etc. Go talk to teachers, who seem to be the last people that people go to ask if something's good or not. But I've created something which means that teachers have this framework. I have years of experience. I know how to teach any student to read, write and spell quickly and easily. And I'm perfectly willing to do that on camera. I keep saying these people that create these programs, these frameworks, whatever, put us both in a room with children. Don't just blind, don't tell us anything about the students. Video us both working with the students, and you will see who is the expert teacher. And if you aren't sure about the difference between an experienced teacher and an expert teacher, just have a look at John Hattie's work. But if you put me into a room with children, I am the expert teacher. So I have created something for teachers, so it's created by teachers for teachers, but I am unusual in that I think big. That's what I do. I don't create a little phonics program, a little whatever. I think big. I think, what do teachers need? Let's give them it all. If you look at anything that says this is what we need to see in a great literacy program, and remember, SSP is not just phonics, it's not just the big 6, it's not just reading, it's language, literacy and literature. The phase 2 routine is for your prep and year 1, so that the children go up to grade 2 no longer learning to read and with exceptional spelling skills. And it means they far exceed the curriculum for grade 2. And it means it's easier for teachers because they don't have children in grades 3 and 4 who still couldn't pick up a Harry Potter book and pick it apart with the motivations and the characters and what have you. So yes, I am a little bit different. Yes, I am an expert. So I've used my experience to create something for teachers. Now, some people don't like that. the only two things that they could possibly use to try and say, oh, ignore this woman, she doesn't know what she's talking about, despite the fact that that's rubbish, is that they will say there's no published research, despite the fact that most actually list things like reading eggs and all sorts of things, all sorts of things that do not have published research, and if they do, the research can be picked apart. It's a bit sketchy, but they will say, well, SSP doesn't have published research. We know what children need. If you're talking about reading, if you're talking about spelling, whatever else, we know what children need, especially reading. Goodness me, the teaching of reading is the most researched thing that we've had over the last 30 odd years. But they will say, where's the published research for SSP? Well, SSP is a whole framework for covering the whole of the Australian curriculum. So you need to think it's on par with C2C in Queensland, L3 in New South Wales. And so I would say, okay, so the teachers who have no choice, they have to do C2C because their education department is telling them what have you, or their leaders are telling them. In New South Wales, L3, where is the published research for C2C or for L3 or for any other government programs that, the education department sat in? And I would say, look at the people who created C2C and L3. Are they as qualified and experienced? Are they expert teachers like me? Just because someone works in an education department or an education department releases something doesn't mean it bypasses everything, the standard that other people seem to be expecting when it's an individual or a company or whatever. So by all means, research this. But if you're going to research SSP, and I would love people to research SSP, we do have a lot of master trainers. We have a lot of individual research projects that I know that are going on. I don't really look at them. They're, what I'm bothered about is how teachers are getting on. But by all means, please research how SSP meets the needs of teachers who are following the Australian curriculum for Foundation and Year 1. Please do. You have people like the Independent Centre, Jennifer Buckingham, whatever, who are picking apart this, absolutely picking this apart and condemning it because they're saying things are missed. Well, look at this. What is missed here? Nothing. And just remember as well that these programs, they might have some phonics. It's the phonics and the phonemic awareness and the phonics, and these two are very, very weak. They might have phonics, and so some of your strands you might cover, what have you, they're not going to exceed, and you're going to have about 30% of children who are going to fail. And when the mandated phonics testing comes in, you're going to find that regardless of whether you're using a phonics program or using these, up to 30% of the children are going to fail. And if you still don't understand why, you really need to follow SSP, because we don't fail those children. We identify them early and we overcome it. But have a look at the phonics programs. Even though people who are training in certain phonics programs will say, of course the children need the visual representations for all the spelling choices, we have the most comprehensive in the world. The most comprehensive. Think of any phoneme, we've got all the choices. But let's just think about this issue, the people who are trying to stop SSP. And I'm presuming the reason that they are so vocal about trying to stop SSP with no reasons whatsoever is because it's a threat. It means that we've got schools that are moving away from those phonics programs they're trying to sell. And remember that a lot of people who are trying to condemn me have motives, whether it's they have a privatization agenda, whether they sell a commercial program, what have they all have agendas. So pick apart when someone says, oh, don't use SSP, pick it apart and talk to people who do use SSP, and especially people who use SSP having already tried all the programs that those loud people are selling or promoting. But so what's the second thing? I said the only thing that people will say is there's no published research. Just think about the irony, though, in that the people who are often saying that are also saying no reading recovery. Which out of all programs or all frameworks to do with reading and spelling has probably the most research in the world. So they are saying no reading recovery, even though there is masses of published research. So it's a lot of cherry picking. But anyway, so let's think about the other reason that they give. They'll say, well, you're not teaching syllables and onset and rhyme. Now, actually, the descriptors, this is the outcomes, this is what you want. Can they recognise and generate rhyming words, alliteration, patterns, syllables and sounds, etc.? Can they do onset and rhyme? So they're not saying you have to teach it. Think back to what I said about the maths. If our children in SSP have the highest level, which is the phonemic awareness, they can isolate, segment, blend, manipulate phonemes, the smallest parts of words. If they can do that, they can split words into any chunks you want, whether it's syllables, onset and rhyme, you know, blends, whatever you want to do. So they are working at a much higher level. So remember what I said about maths. We wouldn't, if we can see a child using quadratic equations, we're not going to say, well, where are you teaching them to count 1 to 1? We say we don't need to because they're so much higher. So at the end of the year, all of these are ticked off. Of course, they can split words into syllables, onset and rhyme, whatever you want, whatever reason you want to know that they can do that. But just also remember, the number one predictor of reading and spelling success and failure is not phonological awareness. It is phonemic awareness. Until you come to have to read and spell you, do, not, eed, to, av, e, ick, w, s. Until a child comes to read and spell, they don't need to have phonemic awareness. They do need to have phonemic awareness to understand how speech sounds, the phonemes, map on paper. You, do, not, eed, need, to, have, o, e, ick, phonemic, w, there, w, s, and awareness. They need to be able to do that because they might be able to recognise this and read some of this, but when they come to spell it and they've got to be able to spell you, eed, need, they can only memorise a certain amount of words, and we don't want to limit children. So if our children are at a much higher level, in fact, when you look through, to be honest, even by term 3, most of the children in SSP are working at a year 1 level. When you look through it, yes, tick, 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 but you don't have to teach something if a child could do it. It would be the same as the child comes in with fantastic reading and spelling skills. The education system, again, is not really based on where do children start, what's their own learning journey, how far on are they on the continuum. What it says is we'll treat, because it's easier to say, well, here's a whole class, let's assess them, let's teach them in the same way at the same time. And it's just, so what I'm trying to do is say, well, yes, we have the constraints of this, but let's give them differentiation. And that's the difference. That's the difference between this and this. And unless you're a teacher in the classroom, you won't fully appreciate that. And that's why I want people in leadership positions and making policies to talk to teachers.